Let's begin. Thanks for that. Yeah, so we'll be giving you some guidance on how to prepare a proposal for the OAD call. You might have attended the session in previous years, but we do have some new information for you this year. So I hope that you remain until the end. The broad agenda for the day is that I will give a brief introduction on the call itself. What is astronomy for development? What is expected in your proposal? What kind of costs are eligible and all of that. And then my colleague Shilpa will talk about something called the theory of change. If you're not familiar, it's basically a conceptual model of how your project activities will lead to certain outcomes, which we hope are related to the SDGs, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And then after that, I will spend some time going through the application form with you, giving maybe some tips on some of the on how to answer some of the questions, and also after that we'll take your questions, and there will be time left for quite a bit of discussion as well. So let me start with the introduction then. Okay, let's see. How do I share my screen? There we go. Share. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay. All right, yeah. So I hope all of you are familiar with the IAOD, or if this is your first time, then let me give a brief description of the office and where we come from and what we do. So the IAU is an international professional society for astronomers. About 10 or so years ago, it established this office called the Office of Astronomy for Development. We're based in Cape Town, South Africa, but we're a global office. We support projects all over the world, and we support activities everywhere. So this was set up about 10 years ago, and the mission of our office is to help drive positive change in society through the application of astronomy. And we keep the definitions very broad here. So astronomy, it can also include some adjacent topics like space and physics, and development of course means development or positive change in society means something that benefits people. So we don't fund astronomy research, but rather we fund projects that benefit communities. Yeah, so that's the first point. The two main aspects of the OAD and the OAD call is that the project should have some astronomy in it, should be linked to astronomy, and it should use astronomy to address a challenge related to development. This could be anything from poverty, education, unemployment issues, all the societal issues that one would normally think of. Just to make it easier, we use the Sustainable Development Goals. I think I have an image of that later on in the presentation. Let's see. Oops. Sorry. I think I clicked too fast that I exited the presentation. Okay, bring it back up. Okay, you should see it now. Yeah, sorry, I didn't have the picture of the Sustainable Development Goals, but in case you haven't seen it, it looks something like this. It's a set of global goals decided at the United Nations level, and there's goals ranging from improving gender equity to reducing poverty to reducing hunger, creating sustainable cities, and so on. So your project should try and address one of these development goals, and it should use astronomy. And like it says at the bottom of the slide, astronomy for development is about people, not the stars. So even though we use astronomy, we care more about how your project has a positive impact on the people, and not so much about creating astronomers or teaching astronomy or doing astronomy research. Our total budget for this year's call is 120,000 euros. Typically, it's divided amongst 10 to 15 projects. So the average amount you can calculate based on that. But for your proposal, please request what you need. You don't have to go by this average number. If you need 10,000, please request that. If you need 15, then yeah, please request that. So I think the maximum amount that we have funded in the past is about 15,000. It's not to say that we won't fund a higher request, but historically that's been the maximum. Most of the projects that we support will be for 1 year, but you have the option of proposing a project that runs for up to 3 years, but it must it must make sense um, to be a 3-year project by design. What I mean by that is that we wouldn't want to support a project for 3 years if all you're doing is simply repeating the same actions in different years. We would want to know that the project cannot be completed in 1 year, and there are various different types of activities that are part of the project that need to be done over multiple years. What projects can you apply for? Like I said in the first slide, should have a connection to astronomy and it should solve a development challenge. But other than that, it's quite broad. As you may know, the IAU has other offices for education, for outreach, for training of students and so on. So if your project is purely an outreach project, then you would rather go to the IAU's outreach office for funding. If it's a purely education project, then you would apply to the education office for funding and so on. So each of the offices has their own call. So if it's an outreach project or education project or training of students project, then you would apply to those respective offices. We have information of the other offices and their call for proposals on the website, so you can look that up. But we don't exclude outreach or education projects as long as they have a development goal in the end. For example, let's say you running an outreach project and you're targeting high school students and you want to run a bunch of outreach activities or informal education activities. Just by that context and definition, it wouldn't qualify for OAD funding. But if you can identify how running that project will lead to certain development outcomes or positive changes in the students or the teachers or the target audience, then it might qualify for OAD. It might qualify for OAD funding. So it cannot simply be an outreach project. If your goal is simply to reach students and teach them astronomy, then it won't qualify for OAD funding. But if your goal is to, let's say, improve literacy levels or improve STEM literacy, or get more students interested in STEM, or improve educational outcomes for those students, then it would qualify for OAD funding. On the last point there, can I apply for a telescope? So we receive some requests every year where a project wants to buy equipment. Again, this is fine as long as it's in the pursuit of the development goal that you have identified. But if your main goal is simply to purchase a telescope because you want to do outreach or for some other reason, then it wouldn't typically qualify for OED funding. So the telescope is just a means and it cannot be the end goal for the project. Just to reiterate again, development focus, it should have strong use of astronomy. So you need to be able to convince the reviewers that you are in fact using astronomy in your project. Then a few other points, we'll come to these points later when I go through the application. You should have a suitable team, and by that I mean people who have astronomy expertise, who have expertise in the particular development challenge that you're addressing, and anything else that you think makes sense to run the project. Similarly, the target audience should also be suitably diverse. I mean, you can address the project towards specific audiences. That's fine as long as you explain that. Then our main focus is on the outcomes and deliverables. So Shilpa will talk about this in a minute. Uh, but this is what the OED is most interested in. And my suggestion is that you spend quite a bit of time on defining what your outcome should be. So the outcome is the the end result of the project. So meaning if you want to run a project to improve STEM literacy among high school students, then that is the main outcome. That is the target. That is what we want you to achieve at the end of the day, increase that STEM literacy. The astronomy part is just the medium or the way you which the way through which you achieve your goal. But the ultimate goal, what we're interested in, is increasing that STEM literacy, and that is what we want you to focus on. And of course, you should have a clear budget and partners and stakeholders who support you. But that only comes in stage 2. So just a final couple of pointers before I hand over to Shilpa. When you design your project, please look at the needs of the target audience. For example, if you're planning let's say, go back to the previous example, project targeting high school students, then make sure that you reach out to the schools beforehand to find out if the students really need your intervention. Do they need your project? Will it make a difference to them? Uh, so please spend some time in doing that initial needs analysis before you start designing the project. The ideal case would be that you actually include the stakeholders in designing the project. So let's say you include the schools in the design of your project and in your project team. That would be ideal, but that's not always possible. So at the least, please reach out to your target audience beforehand and find out what they need and propose a project based on that need. Another pointer is just the sustainable development goals. So I showed you this image. There's 17 of them, and in the application form, we ask you to choose up to 3. It is possible that your project will address more than 3 SDGs, but we think 3 is sort of a good maximum number to aim for, because you don't want to do too many things in your project either. I mean, we are giving a few thousand euros at the end of the day. So we want you to be ambitious, but don't spread yourself too thin. So we want you to be realistic as well. So please take that into consideration. And the final point is find out what other people have done, find out what other OED projects have done in your region, but also in other parts of the world. So it is very likely that your project idea has been implemented in a slightly different way by someone else, somewhere else. So make sure to do that research and find out what other people have done so you can learn and build on that. So let me now hand over to Shilpa.
Thanks, Ram. Can you guys see my screen? Okay. Okay, thanks, Ram, for this introduction. And I'm going to be talking a bit about the theory of change. And as Ram mentioned, this is meant to guide you while you're designing your project. Maybe some of you are already familiar with this. It's basically just like we can call it a logical model. And then it gives you like pointers. It allows you to think a little bit more systematically about your project and what the end goal and the impact is. And please just like stop me if you have any question or you want some clarification on specific aspect of the presentation. So this is just a brief overview of what I'm going to cover. Basically, what is a theory of change, which I will refer to as a TOC, how organization can use a TOC, and how does that benefit different audiences, what are the different components and jargon that it entails, and what are basically the steps required in building a proper theory of change, and how does it actually look, what are the principles, and how will that impact the call for proposal, and how can it help you. So basically, a theory of change is a logical model which describes a relationship between your inputs, and the way we define inputs is whatever resources you are putting into the project. For example, time, money, and human resources available. And how does this relationship relate to the activities that you actually do throughout your project? And then subsequently, what is the final impact of your project? And your impact is generally tracked through output, the things that you can measure, and the outcomes, the changes that results from the project. That's what Ram was talking about. And basically, it's a form of a logical model. Also, it provides a description of like how and why a program or intervention is expected to lead to the desired changes or outcomes. As Ram mentioned, we want the projects to be somehow linked to at least 3 SDG goals. So by thinking about how your project will eventually lead to the desired changes or outcomes, then we will get the flow of information from the resources you're putting into your project, and that how eventually that will translate to how the project will essentially support XYZ SDG goals. It also provides a roadmap for how a program is intended to achieve the long-term goals and create meaningful impact. So it just goes beyond outlining your project activities and outcomes, but also focuses on mapping the pathways between the different aspects on your project. Okay. So how can organization actually use a theory of change? Different organizations will use it in different ways. But for example, for the education sector, it can be used to guide the development and implementation of educational program. In the healthcare sector, it can be used to guide intervention and programs aimed at improving health outcome. For social work, we can use that to address social issues and improve the well-being of individuals and communities. And for agriculture, it can be used to actually implement programs and initiatives aimed at improving agricultural practices and increasing food securities. Those are just examples. Any kind of organization can use theory of change in a way that they want to demonstrate how a specific intervention or program they are putting forward or they are funding will result in a desired impact. So in terms of audiences, that will very much depend on your project. And I mean, in your cases, it will be very specific to the OAD call for proposal. So it could be for people and communities. If you have a project that is aimed to improve some aspect of community with regards to whether educational or access to specific infrastructure, then we can make sure, like through a theory of change, there is transparency. So people and communities can actually see when you present to them the theory of change. That will actually help you to build trust and provide a mechanism for the community to hold initiative leaders, so perhaps like yourself, accountable for results, because you are saying, I'm going to be putting X resources and that will result in X impact for your community. In terms of strategy, which is a little bit more systematic, your theory of change can be used as a strategic plan. It is just like a common reference point to keep the work on track because you did the initial groundwork and planning, and then this can be used as a tool for documentation and communication for your different stakeholders. And in cases where you want to track progress, a theory of change can also be valuable in this context because it will allow you to gauge. When I will show you the different components, you will see that there's an element of time in it. So it will allow you to understand how you're progressing, how you're measuring against your intended progress, and whether you need to revisit some of your timeline. And then in terms of funders, which is relevant for us as well, it is meant to be used as a communication tool. So you are applying for funding, and then you are sharing your theory of change with us, with the OAD, and then the OAD will use that as a sort of visual representation of what your work, what work you will be doing. And then this will allow you to just like communicate very clearly what is your project, what is the intended impact. So there are different components of the theory of change. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but there are different degrees of complexities. There are projects that span like 10 years, 1 year, 3 years. So this is just the skeleton of like what a good theory of change should have. But it is up to you to decide to what level of granularity or what level of complexity you want to involve in your final theory of change. But normally, the first bit of it is the problem. So what is the issue or challenge your work is aimed to tackle? So what is it that you're trying to solve, or what is it that you are trying to bring a solution to? And then the inputs, as I mentioned, is the essential resources or investment required to guarantee the execution of the activities. What do you actually need? So in your cases, it will be, you know, part of the funding that is being supplied through the OAD. But then what else do you need? Do you need specific infrastructure? Do you need some additional specialists? And then activities actually talk about the actual work that you will be doing your on the project or your program. So what will you be doing? What is your team going to be doing in order to create the output and outcome to achieve the aim of your project? And then the output is whatever comes as a result of your project. So it could be products, services, or facilities that results from your project activities, like the step before. For example, you're planning to do multiple workshops, you're developing leaflets for communication, or you're doing case studies. So those are just like very tangible outputs. And then outcomes. So sometimes there is a confusion between output and outcomes, but outcomes mainly is so as a result of your project, what are the changes and benefits and learning that result from it? If you manage to do what you intended to do and produce the outputs for your projects, what is the outcome? And then how did your project, when you were successful in doing your output, what are the changes that it bring? Did it bring the desired changes to a community? Did it bring the desired changes in the mindset, or did it change, I don't know, legislation or something? So it's like, it has to be tangible as well. And then the final step is the impact. So this is much the wider impact on longer term effects of your project. And normally when we talk about that is, does your project, after it has been completed, or maybe there is a sustained positive impact, what are the impact on maybe the society, the environment, or the economy in general? So those are like quite broad impact. And it could be direct uses of whatever things you have developed, or it could be non-direct, like a very general positive impact on society, environment, or the economy. But it's very important as well is when you're doing this exercise, throughout all of the steps, you have to communicate to whoever will be reading your theory of change, what are the assumptions that you're making when you're developing it? Because Nothing is set in stone. You have a plan in your mind. You think this is how your project will go about, but in doing so, you are actually making some assumption that, okay, this and this will happen. This needs to be in place for my project to happen, but this needs to be communicated in a theory of change. So for example, you would already identified some of the weaknesses, the risks, or how context. At the end of the day, the theory of change is just like a narrative. It's just telling a story of how your work will translate to a desired impact. So at the core of the theory of change, you have to communicate what are the assumptions you made in order to reveal your underlying thinking. Okay, this is because I made those assumptions. This is how I believe my project will lead to certain impact. So this is just like components to the theory of change. But what is interesting or maybe a little bit challenging is normally when you do the actual work, you don't go from problems, input, activities, outputs, and finally to impact. The way you do it, this is just like to facilitate thinking, is the first step. You need to ask yourself, what is the problem you're trying to solve? Or so for your specific project, what are you bringing a new aspect? Or are you bringing a new solution? So what is the problem you're trying to solve? Once you figure out the problem you're trying to solve, then you go to step 2. And step 2 is actually defining, if you are able to actually solve this problem, what will be the final impact? The final impact, remember, is the wider impact on whether it's environment, people, economy, society. So what is the ultimate impact of the work you have to achieve? This is like more like vision. And this is like after your project has completed. Once you have an understanding of like how that final impact would be, then you work backwards because you know what is the final impact. Then that will guide you. Okay, if I need this impact in, I don't know, in 2 years, then what sort of outcomes I need to make sure my project results in. If I need my project to be successful to produce X outcome so that I can have this final impact. And then you start working backwards. Once you define your outcome, so how will you see the signs that your project has been effective such that you get your ultimate impact? Once you get your outcomes, then once you go one step before, so then how will I measure? What are the kind of outputs that will allow me to make sure I see positive outcomes? Do I need to actually do, I don't know, 2 workshops, 3 hackathons? What do I need to define as measure of success to have these positive outcomes, which will lead to my final impact? Once you have defined your outputs, then the processes here are activities. So what do I need to do? So I said I need to do two workshops. So what do I need in maybe 2 different quarters in the 6 months to make sure I can do 2 workshops? And then finally, my inputs. What kind of resources do I need? I will get funding from the OAD, but in terms of human resource, in terms of infrastructure, what do I need in order to make sure I am able to deliver on the processes, like the activities that will result in the outputs, outcomes, and then finally the impact. So this is just a way to try and force you to just like link everything together. Because if you start trying to define a problem and then try to do the first step, like input, what resources do I have? Do I need? You tend to try and lose yourself. So the idea is always like to start big and then try and coming down in specific detail on like how I will make sure I will achieve what I set, what the project is intended to do. This is just a summary of like what I just talked about. You define your impact, your outcomes, your activities, and remember there are the assumption as well that I talked about. The assumption in itself is not it doesn't need to happen at a specific moment, like we mentioned in the previous slide. The assumption can be at any point when you're defining your impact, your outcome, or your activities. Wherever you feel there is like a specific assumption that you're making, then you have to write it down. And because you're working on a sort of like longer term impacts up to the what inputs I need to do on an everyday basis, it does allow you to establish a kind of timeline and plan your resources. And then the final step would be like you build your narrative. When you have all the different components together, that will allow you, I will show you a few examples, like visually, that will allow you to create your theory of change. And then visually, you'll be able to tell a story. So how does this theory of change actually look? It is basically meant to be a single document that communicates all that different elements. So it can get quite busy, but that will very much depend on like how you want to communicate it. Normally for bigger and more complex project, you will have a one-page theory of change, but you will have supporting documents, like maybe going into a little bit more detail about the activities, but a proper theory of change is meant to be only a single document, which has all the different elements I talked to you about. The problem you're trying to solve, the impact, your outcomes, your outputs, the activities, and then your resources, as well as the assumption. And in our cases, it will be very useful if you can add also the SDG goals you're trying to work towards, because you would have already identified your impact. And by identifying your impact, that will link that broader impact will allow you to tell us, okay, I am supporting SDG goal this, and that. This is just like a snapshot. Yes, sorry.
Sorry, there's a raised hand. Do you want to take the question now or
Yeah,
later?
sorry, I'm not seeing raised hand on my side. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I wanted to ask regarding the TOC. Is it also part of the proposal? Like, we have to submit the final proposal. Does it form part of it, or is it separate?
Maybe this is something you can answer on. Is it something that we want to have eventually?
No, it's not part of the proposal, but we highly recommend that you go through the TOC process for your proposal when you design it. I mean, it doesn't, as Shilpa said, it can be very complicated, but you can keep it simple as well. So it is possible to have a simple, straightforward TOC. Maybe if you spend like 2 to 3 hours on it, I think it'll really help to clarify what you want to achieve from this project and what you need to do that. I think that will eventually lead to a better proposal. So you don't need to submit a TOC in the application, but we recommend going through the process.
Okay, thank you.
Is that okay?
Yes,
Okay.
I understood it. Thank you.
So yes, it doesn't have to be really complicated. It's just forces you to think a bit more about your project. So for example, in this case, this is just a very brief example. The vision, the impact that they want to have, we envision a world without material poverty where all people flourish. It's a very bold statement, very big. In this case, they said the broader vision, and then they talk about the impact. And then the impact is the broad kind of results of whatever activities they want to do. So in order to envision a world without material poverty, they want children and families, they want them to meet their immediate needs. They want families to become self-sufficient. They want communities to be very, to be supported by local business leaders. They want local leaders to create opportunities for them. So that's like the bigger picture. And then in order to support that impact that they want this intervention to have, then they start asking the question, okay, if we want family to actually meet their immediate needs, what kind of outcome our intervention need, what does that mean? So what they mean is, okay, immediate needs, we said, family must be able to satisfy their most urgent basic needs, like clothing, food, shelter, and all of this. Kids can be kids. They need to be able to be provided with education. We need a specific system or intervention to make sure there's like equal opportunity for work for people who want to find a job. And then we want a space in society where entrepreneurship is promoted, such that people can be motivated to grow their business and in turn support themselves. And then they thought this is just like a charity, and then they focused on what they want to do. Like in that specific case, they established their own targets for 2030. They wanted to have 1 million pairs of the shoe that grow. It's just a charity. They want these products to be on the market, and through this, they want to support job creation. They want to support entrepreneurship. And then they define what activities they want to do and then what kind of inputs their specific intervention. So it's just meant to be, a theory of change is meant to be visually attractive, like this. You can have it in different format. You can have it in different colors or whatever, but the idea is someone who is reading this theory of change can go from inputs to the vision, and then they can make the link. Sorry. Yeah. This one is also, I will not go into detail with this one, but I'm just like showing you the flow of information in this case. So it's very much up to you how you want to communicate your theory of change and how you want to adapt it to your audience. In this case, they had like a super impact, the final impact. This is a case of they wanted women and children to be free from technological abuse, and then they start working backwards. They want to find a way how women can be safe and free from technological abuse, control, and violence, and then that helped them to establish what are the outcomes. They had a lot of activities, so instead of like listing all activities, they put like priorities pillar, and then they had a separate document where in each priority they established what kind of activities they want to do. For example, relationship and leadership, they had a list of specific activities, and then in this specific case, they decided to put the problem that they're trying to solve at the bottom. So it's very much how you want to communicate it, but there's a certain logical way of going through it. You need to build that relationship between your impact, outcomes, outputs, input, and your assumption. So basically, though, the theory of change, the way that yes, sorry, on my side, I'm not seeing if there's any raised hands or anything. Are there any questions? Okay, so basically the theory of change, when you can see that it can be a bit complicated, but you need to work on it like consultatively. So whoever's in your team or whoever is an important stakeholder in your project, they need to be in the room together, or they need at least to be given the opportunity to review. So it should be developed consultatively to reflect the understanding of all relevant stakeholder. It should be grounded in, tested with, and revised based on robust evidence. Whatever you're saying, there needs to, if someone questions you further, you need to be able to show to them that your train of thought or your underlying evidence. And then it should support continuous learning. It is not meant to be a static document, because as you will revisit it, it can change. It is meant to be more of a dynamic document. And then, so in terms of what's next, I think maybe Ram will touch a little bit more on it. But if there are applicants who are interested in presenting a theory of change when they're doing their call for proposal, then maybe we can share some of the supporting document with them to understand the components and jargon. And then on our side, I know in the near future, we'll try to develop a template that will help you guys, along with supporting document, to fill in that theory of change. And in any case, if you think about developing a theory of change, it will be an added benefit to your own work in terms of project management activities, because that will allow you to think about different things like your timelines, Gantt chart, how to set KPIs, and eventually establish monitoring and evaluation framework, because you would have tracked everything. You would have thought about your outputs. You would have thought about what resources you need. So that gives you an element of, okay, I have already think about that. So it should be easier for me to develop those specific project management elements that are sometimes very important to communicate to funders. And that's it on my side. Is there any question? I think I ran a little bit over time. Sorry about that, Ram.
No worries. I think I saw a hand raised and then disappeared. Any questions? So I'll just spend a bit of time going through the application. But just to emphasize what Shilpa talked about, the theory of change, I think, is a good conceptual model for all projects to think about. So if you spend some time, even if it's just 1 hour, to sit down with your team and try to define, okay, what is your outcome? What will be your output? So the outputs are called as deliverables as well. Sometimes in the application form, you'll see deliverables, which is the same as outputs. So what is your outcome? What is your output or deliverable? Then that will help you understand what activities you need to do. So normally when we, or including myself, when I want to run a project, what I do is I decide the activities. So I will say, oh, I want to run an informal education session for students. So I decide on the activities without thinking about the impact or outcome, right? We want you to do the opposite, because our most important consideration is the outcome. What improvements will you create in society through your project? So list those improvements or outcomes first. Those should be the main goals of the project. So I know there's a few projects who want to run astrotourism activities. So in that case, please define what will be the main outcome of your astrotourism. Is it to create employment? Is it to generate revenue for the locals, something like that? So please define that outcome first. Then after that, you think about, okay, what is the best activity or set of activities that will help you reach that outcome? So as Shilpa said, please go through the process in sort of the reverse non-intuitive way. And I think that will be very helpful. Are there no questions?
There's one question on whether they can pitch 2 proposals.
Yeah. You're welcome to submit more than one proposal. That's fine. Let me open my application form. Okay, so please submit your applications online. When you go to the this link, then you will, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to click. If you go to this link, you'll see all the information about the call for proposals, and then at the bottom of this page, you'll see the link to the application form. So please use that form and then submit your application. I'll skip this first section. This is just for our information to be used internally, not for evaluation. Okay, so this is the beginning of the application. I think these are all self-explanatory. Project summary, please spend quite a bit of time on the project summary. This is the first place that the reviewers will come into contact with your project idea. So it's important that you're clear, concise, make sure that you actually give a summary of the project. So that should include your problem, what is your solution, and what you will do. Sometimes people don't give a good summary, and it just creates confusion in the reviewers. They don't know what exactly you are doing, or they don't know what your problem is. And that that doesn't lead to a good score for a proposal. So please spend a lot of time for your project summary. You'll see many of the questions have character limits. This is to ensure that we give a fair chance to all applicants, so please stick to the character limits as well. And then we have the section on challenge. What is the problem that you're trying to solve? This would be like we were talking about reducing unemployment or improving the quality of education and so on. But be as descriptive as possible about the problem, especially in your local context. So we don't know exactly what are the different factors influencing the problem in your city or in your region. So please describe all of that. Again, there's a character limit here. And this question is about SDG. So please choose from among the 17. I already told you we are asking you to select a maximum of 3, not more than that. And then deliverables and outcomes. This is what Shilpa talked about. The first question is about how will you solve the problem using astronomy? So the previous question simply asked about the problem. So here you just describe the problem. But in this question, you answer what is the role of astronomy in solving the problem. So this is also very important because this is the space for you to explain where astronomy fits into your project. And then we ask for the deliverables. So the deliverables are the same as outputs. These would be like, what you create for your project in terms of presentation, lectures, manuals, and all that stuff, training videos, and so on. So that's what we're looking for here. What are the immediate outputs or deliverables? And then the outcomes. Like I said before, this is probably the most important question on the application form, together with the project summary. So please spend quite a bit of time on this. You really need to define your outcomes during your project design and make sure they are clear and specific and measurable and all of that. And then a few other details, what language, how will you ensure diversity in the target audience, who's in the team. So you don't have to give the names of any team members. So we actually suggest not adding names because we want the reviewers to be unbiased as possible, when evaluating an application. So don't add names, but please add other details of the team, like their expertise, have they run similar projects, and so on. And then some questions about the funding. If you have done this work previously, then we ask you for that information. And then finally, budget, also quite important. So what is the total project budget? If you're getting money from other sources, then please include that. So we just want the total amount. And then how much are you requesting from the OED? In stage 1, we just ask you for an overview of the budget. So just list the most expensive items, what is the item and what is the cost. We don't need a detailed breakdown. That will come in stage 2. Yeah, so that's basically the application form. I see a question, can we use figures and plots? No figures and plots, only text. And we discourage links as well. So your proposal, this application form, should be a standalone document. Any other questions? Okay, any questions at all about, yeah, BJ?
Yes, the PDF that we're showing now, I haven't seen it like anywhere on your website. Is it available?
Yeah, it's available on the website. So if you go to the call for proposals page,
And
and
I'll
then
call for proposal, yes.
and then let me share my screen. And then if you go to apply online, so this is the call for proposals. If you go to apply online, it will show you the application form link. And if you click on that, takes you to the application form. And here you can download the PDF or the Word version of the document.
Okay, I'm there. Okay, I see it. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? So I don't know which of my other colleagues are here. I see Joyful. Do you want to add anything, Joyful?
Hi, everyone. I never want to add anything. Ram always puts me on the spot, honestly. All I can say is good luck with the applications.
Thank you.
Okay, so if that's the case. Oh, Sam?
No, I think you guys covered everything. Just good luck. And as long as you communicate clearly about the idea, you should have a pretty good chance of success.
Thanks, Sam. I don't know who the other OED account is. I assume it's Kevin. Okay. So yeah, that's it from our side. So we do offer support for you to write your proposal. It is on the webpage. If you want any help in writing the proposal, please reach out to us. But please do that by the 14th of May. That's the deadline to request for support. So we'll provide comments on your idea or draft proposal. All of that information is available online. Yeah, DJ?
Yes, one last question. Do we have to use this document, or we can use, we can include all the steps needed, but in our own template?
You'll need to submit the form online, so you have to answer the questions.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so that's it from our side. Thanks all for joining, and please drop us an email. So I'll just enter the email address here if you have any questions. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.